Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this 28th of May. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can do that easily by watching the Alaska Weather Show each night or find us on YouTube. Go to youtube.com or on your YouTube app. And at the search bar, type in AKwx TV. AKwx TV. That's Alaska Weather TV for short. And subscribe, and you'll be able to get the latest updates no matter where you are. As long as you've got your mobile device, it will alert you that the next show's ready to watch. So if you're going to go out and fish for a while, you're going to be walking down the trail a little bit, it's okay. You've got another way to watch the show, and you don't have to be in front of the TV all night long. Let's take a look at the forecast here, and you can do that easily by checking in with the Alaska Weather Information Line, 1-800-472-0391. You can always check your forecast information at weather.gov/Alaska. And if you can't find what you're looking for, you know my email, david.snider@noaa.gov. As far as the weather goes, we're talking about high water still coming down the AKwx River. It's now past AKwx. Water levels have gone down a little bit, but we expect that with recent heavy rains, the water may be coming back up just a little bit, about a 1 or 2 foot fluctuation. So there's still going to be some flooding in the region, and we expect that to at least be at a minor flood stage there, probably through Friday. So pay attention to local information as it's being shared there with you. But it looks like this will continue to affect areas downriver toward Hughes and Huslia. So pay attention to that. If you are on the AKwx River, do expect rises to continue and perhaps even some minor flooding. Don't be surprised to see some areas affected a little bit further downstream as we go through the rest of the week, especially with a current heat in the area and still melting some of the snow in the region. So be prepared for that. In the meantime, here's the breakup map, and things look pretty good. We've still got a flood warning here across that part of the AKwx Valley, but all rivers are pretty much open at this point. There might still be some mostly open conditions. There may be still a little bit of ice up across some of the western Brooks Range headwaters there, but other than that, things look pretty good for the map. So probably won't see too much more of the breakup map in the coming days. As we go into fire danger season, of course, we're waiting on the rains to slow down. At least in south central, conditions have been fairly wet here. In fact, it is the wettest May on record for Anchorage in recorded history that we know of, about 2 inches of rain. This is usually the first month of what we would consider the dry season, so not so much dry season around this part of town. So you probably noticed that if you are anywhere in south central. In the meantime, the upper Yukon, the middle Yukon Valley, and the AKwx for that matter are seeing increasing areas of high fire danger. Areas north of the Alaska Range into the interior are looking at higher fire danger, as well as the Copper River Valley, right around the Anchorage region and the southern end of the Matanuska Valley, and also across the Bering Sea coast of the Alaska Peninsula, looking at increased fire danger as the last couple of days. As we look at the satellite picture, you can see a broad area of low pressure sitting south of the Alaska Peninsula, and a broad area of southerly winds working its way into south central and eventually into the interior. On the other side of that, high pressure sitting out across the western chain is blowing in a little bit more of a northerly breeze for the central and western Aleutians. With that, we continue a pretty dry stretch for southern parts of southeast, now listed in extreme drought. Again, very high levels of drought conditions for southern southeast, which includes Craig, Ketchikan, and Metlakatla, of course. And areas just north of that, certainly in the higher end of drought, maybe not quite as dry, and you consider that by looking at the amount of rain or precipitation in a normal or average year and compare that to where you have been. And even though it may still be wet at times, it is not at the level at which it once was, or at least on average it once was. So with that level of deficiency as far as precipitation goes, hydrologists can look at that and go, yeah, that's extremely dry considering what is typical for this time of the year and for the entire year and how long that has gone on. So extreme drought conditions continue there. In the meantime, we are seeing enough heat build up across the Yukon Valley into southwestern Alaska that we're getting some cloud buildup there. Won't be surprised to see a few showers and thunderstorms. A better chance that we're going to see more of that happening here across the interior today, tomorrow, and the next couple days. That area is probably going to shift a little bit further westward as more moisture meets up with more heat across the Yukon Valley and across the AKwx Valley. Today we've been watching a little puff of clouds here right about here. You can see that blow up this afternoon right around Umiat, and shower and thunderstorm activity has been moving off of the Brooks Range northward toward the Arctic coast. Right now it looks like there's enough cool air coming in from high pressure sitting up across the Arctic that probably won't last very long, probably won't make it to the coast. Might be surprised, but it does look like there's a lot of stable air right along the coast itself, which would prevent shower and thunderstorm activity from drawing in that warm, moist air at the surface and keeping those clouds fed and moving toward you. So chances are that'll be dying off here by the time you're watching the show. High pressure is sitting across the eastern Gulf now, 1,023 millibars. You can see some pockets of wet weather, mainly across south central and southwestern Alaska. Low pressure is sitting here across the North Pacific at 989 millibars. And around the interior, generally it looked like it was around Fairbanks, not over Fairbanks. There were some pockets of rainfall there, some of those heavier showers perhaps. Didn't see a whole lot of lightning by mid-afternoon. Low pressure just west of the Bering Strait at 1,008 millibars is working its way across the Seward Peninsula. And there's a weak wave of low pressure here sitting across the northern Bering. A lot of clouds out west, a lot of clouds down south, a lot of clouds over the interior, but in between those clouds, boy, what a beautiful day in south central and southeast. Temperatures were fairly mild. As we get through tonight, high pressure will back into Prince William Sound. That's going to trap some clouds and probably set up an opportunity for a little bit of fog here around the Yakutat region, again with a very stable region of air generally east of this ridge, and that could include parts of southeast. Down to the south, 988 millibar low there, a trough of low pressure moving northward slowly toward Kodiak and the Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, and Nikolsky and Unalaska Dutch Harbor. Probably see some breaks in those clouds around southwest, and then showers will be the predominant weather pattern across most of the interior, especially in the vicinity of this low pressure trough. Up north, low pressure sitting around Arctic Village, and even further north still, right along some of our coastal villages, there's a possibility that you'll see some rain and snow mixing together. Probably nothing monumental, but it does look like you'll still be cold enough, at least a little bit off the surface of the earth, for a little bit of rain and snow there in places like Wainwright, AKwx, Utqiagvik, and maybe as far east as Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse, but again, it doesn't look like it'll have any major impact. For your day tomorrow, shower and thunderstorm activity will be widely scattered across the interior in the vicinity of low pressure right over the Tanana Valley, and that trough of low pressure will point eastward. High pressure sits across the eastern Gulf. That's going to help keep southeast, and just a beautiful pattern there, so a lot more sunshine for you, but again, that's not helping if you're looking for rainfall in southern and southeast. Low pressure south of the east, the Aleutian Chain at 987 millibars. We'll have some light rain and maybe some drizzle on the western side of it. Places like St. Paul, St. George, even St. Matthew will probably see some drops. It may not be anything substantial once again. Around the Bristol Bay region and northward, a better chance you'll get into some showers, and that should be true for parts of the western Gulf. But as you get into the Kenai Fjords region, perhaps the Barren Islands, Prince William Sound, better chance that's going to turn into a lighter and steadier rainfall. And then once you get back into the interior, a better chance you'll see generally showery and perhaps even stormy conditions. That pattern of unsettled and even unstable air across the interior will shift westward a little bit. So places like the Yukon Delta, Norton Sound, and some of the coastal communities there up towards Seward, and maybe even up toward, Nome, and then up toward the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range may get in on some shower and storm activity Thursday afternoon. High pressure doesn't move. Southeast weather pattern doesn't change much. But we do get a little bit of a shift in that southerly flow around south central. We'll have a better chance of seeing some more rainfall around the region here, which could start sneaking into the periphery around Anchorage, Wasilla, and Palmer. Look for showers and have a better chance of that in the upper Yukon Valley there, as well as places like Eagle and Northway, more specifically. Here's a look at your temperatures. You know it's going to be warm tonight, right? You can just sense it. Temps in the 40s to almost 50 degrees in southeast. Ketchikan almost 47. South Central and Prince William Sound in the lower to mid 40s there. 45 in Kodiak. Mid to upper 40s for the interior. Fort Yukon 47 degrees. And just below freezing around Utqiagvik out toward Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse. Nome, you're looking at 38. Southwest in the mid to upper 40s there. Bristol Bay not too far behind. And lower to mid 40s for the Chain and the Alaska Peninsula. High temperatures tomorrow pushing into the upper 60s and lower 70s for the interior. Again, a very mild day from McGrath eastward toward Fort Yukon and south into south central. Temps will be a little cooler than that, but not much. Upper 50s to lower 60s at least, maybe even mid 60s around Talkeetna. 50s and 60s for southeast, mid to upper 30s to about 40 for the North Slope, 55 for Nome, and 50s and 60s for southwest, even Dutch Harbor and Unalaska pushing the 50-degree mark. Overnight lows Thursday morning, still very mild, 30s and 40s in most places there, 32 around St. Lawrence Island, 28 for Utqiagvik, and high temps on Thursday, easily into the mid-70s for the interior, 50s in the south, and upper 60s southeast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And on the aviation weather now, IFR conditions are expected to be fairly widespread up and down the Chukchi coast and then working their way into the coastal plain of the North Slope. They're all the way from Utqiagvik westward Wainwright, around St. Lawrence Island and south into the Central Chain and along the Pacific coast of the Alaska Peninsula into parts of Prince William Sound and over the Barren Islands and the southern parts of Cook Inlet, but kind of escaping most of Shelikof Strait, and then out of the Gulf we will see widespread IFR. Marginal conditions will exist across southeast into the Copper River Valley, again bypassing most of Cook Inlet tomorrow, and hit and miss across south and west as we get into the afternoon tomorrow. Watch for widely scattered shower and thunderstorm activity across the interior. The MVFR pulls away from the coast a little bit in southeast. We'll still see it lingering around Prince William Sound and parts of the Kenai Fjords. In fact, areas generally just north of Seward there and south of Whittier may be looking at some IFR continuing throughout the day. That should be true for Kodiak as well and parts of the central Gulf. St. Matthew, St. Paul, St. George, all the way down to the central and eastern chain, looking at IFR through the afternoon. And we will see some occasional improvements across the Chukchi coast, but MVFR should be fairly widespread across most of the North Slope communities. As we get into your afternoon or morning hours, I should say, on Thursday, watch for the Chukchi coast to see IFR. At least in the morning hours. St. Paul, St. George still looking at IFR into the central and eastern chain, parts of Prince William Sound, the Barren Islands. Look for a lot of improvement, though, across southeast and really most of the interior through your Thursday morning. Widespread convection will be back again across the west coast, including the Seward Peninsula, the Kobuk and Noatak valleys, all the way down toward the Yukon Delta and the middle and upper parts of the Yukon Valley as well. Look for IFR across most of the Bering Sea, the central and eastern chain, all the way through the western sections of Prince William Sound, though many areas around Cordova up toward Valdez may be dealing with only MVFR. And then southeast, looking for widespread VFR to continue through your afternoon on Thursday. Here's your pass conditions now for Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass. We expect to see VFR conditions continue throughout really most of your Wednesday. Lake Clark and Rail Pass should hold at marginal levels through most of the day. We'll see some improvements through Rainy Pass after MVFR start. VFR in Windy Pass, look for VFR conditions moving through Isabel Pass throughout your day Wednesday. Metasta Pass looks pretty good at this point. Tanita Pass probably looking at marginal levels and then pushing over toward VFR as the afternoon goes on. And we'll start at IFR and Portage Pass and may see improvements as well as MVFR as the afternoon gets around. But again, could linger at IFR at least through a good part of the day. Chilkoot and White Pass also expected to see improving weather from MVFR conditions to start. Here's your surface freezing line now, and you can see that's lingering up around the North Slope communities there, the 2,000, 4,000 foot elevated lines pushing south of St. Lawrence Island and just north and west of St. Paul and St. George. You can also see substantial warming here working its way in from the Yukon into the interior where levels are above 6,000 feet. And generally from the capital city southward toward Haida Gwaii, you're looking at 6 to about 10,000 foot levels there, most of south central at or above 6,000 feet there into southwest. Let's take a look at your icing potential then. It looks like most areas are going to see those freezing levels pretty high up there, anywhere from about 8 to about 10,000 feet for the North Slope and down the west coast. Most of that will be isolated moderate, and also levels as high as 9 to 10,000 feet across south central to southwest. We're also watching for convection, of course, which implies isolated but severe turbulence, icing potential there, turbulence as well. But watch for that to develop in the afternoon along the Yukon Valley and into parts of the upper Koyukuk Valley as you get into your Wednesday afternoon. The jet stream tells us that a large trough of low pressure sitting across the Bering in the North Pacific here, that is driving in a strong southerly surge into Kodiak Island and parts of South Central with a westerly component helping that to move right along there, building a ridge across the western parts of North America, but also undercutting that is a trough of low pressure that's feeding severe weather potential once again across the central and eastern lower 48. So if you've got some travel plans, keep that in mind. That is keeping our weather unsettled here at the moment with that deep southerly flow, anywhere from 15 to 40 knots coming in across the Gulf of Alaska into the interior and south central, 20 knots across the Brooks Range, and more of an offshore flow blowing from the YK Delta and the Bristol Bay communities there, low pressure just south of the eastern chain. High pressure in charge of southeastern Alaska, and you can see very little change here at 3,000 feet. Low pressure is just a little bit further north and east here, with southerlies across Kodiak Island, the Kenai Peninsula, light easterlies across the interior, and a little bit of a stronger easterly flow coming out of Bristol Bay here, 25 to 40 knots northerlies for the central and western chain. What about turbulence? Well, we would expect to see a little bit more considerable moderate around parts of Bristol Bay, the Alaska Peninsula, Lake Iliamna southward, really all the way out toward just about Sand Point. Kodiak Island looking at considerable moderate, as well as Homer and areas eastward to just about Resurrection Bay and Seward. A little bit of chop around Haida Gwaii and a few bumps there across the eastern chain.
On March 11, 2011, a powerful tsunami hit Japan, destroying cities and villages. As the water receded back into the ocean, it pulled what remained of buildings, cars, boats, and homes along with it. Scrap metals, plastics, and objects of all shapes and sizes either sank near the shore or floated away. In the days that followed, large masses of floating debris could easily be seen by satellite imagery and aerial photos. In the wake of this disaster, NOAA is assessing the potential impact that the debris may have on U.S. shores. So, where will this debris go, and when will it get there? To help answer those questions, scientists are using computer models to estimate the debris' path, using its starting location in the tsunami zone and historical weather and ocean conditions. The findings are that some debris could pass near or wash ashore in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands as early as this winter. Debris may also approach the west coast of the United States in 2013 and potentially circle back to the main Hawaiian Islands in 2014. But scientists caution that there are limitations to what computer models can tell us. Now that the debris has moved out of satellite view, and with currents and winds in the Pacific constantly changing, there is no guarantee that the debris will stay on the predicted path. Items will sink along the way, or break up and disperse in many directions. Despite these unknowns, NOAA and its partners are collecting data, assessing possible impacts, and making preparations in case debris does wash ashore. The 2011 tsunami in Japan reminds us that the devastation that happens on land can also become a marine debris issue at sea.
Imagine all of this underwater. In a major tsunami, it could happen. In this part of Washington state, it's happened before, hundreds of years ago. Sometime in the future, it will likely happen again. But we can be ready. If a tsunami strikes, this school will provide a place for people to ride it out above the waves.
We're in Westport, Washington, and right behind me is the very first tsunami vertical evacuation center in the United States.
This is an emergency. Please walk to the nearest exit. Go to the stairs tower and proceed up the stairs.
Tsunamis are a potential hazard for low-lying coastal areas. That's why many coastal communities have plans in place to get people to safety, high ground or inland, where they can be beyond the reach of a tsunami. Often there are signs showing where to go and where to gather. Most tsunamis are caused by underwater earthquakes along subduction zones, where two of Earth's plates collide and one is forced under the other. Westport and other Pacific Northwest coastal communities are especially at risk because one of these zones lies just offshore. It's called the Cascadia Subduction Zone. An earthquake here caused a tsunami in 1700 that flooded shores as far away as Japan. Experts say it's just a matter of time before it happens again. Since the subduction zone is so close, a tsunami like the one in 1700 could strike before people in some low-lying areas could get to high ground or inland. And Westport doesn't have a lot of high ground or easy routes inland.
If we get an earthquake or a tsunami, we're going to get a lot of water in the area really quickly, and we needed a place to go. So our community built this brand new school, and above our gym and cafeteria, we have a roof, and so the idea is that we'll get all of our students up, and anybody from the community who needs to get up, they can get up there as well.
Ocosta Elementary School might seem like a normal school, but look more closely. It's engineered to withstand monster waves. Tsunami vertical evacuation shelters must be able to resist the powerful forces that a tsunami brings. Hydrodynamic, buoyant, hydrostatic, and debris impact forces and strong currents. They're also designed to help people get to safety quickly.
There are 4 big staircases on each corner of the building, and each one of those staircases is 8 feet wide, and we can get the whole school evacuated in about 4.5 minutes.
Everybody should be at a 0.
On the roof of the building, there is water and food and buckets and shelters and tarps and blankets and different things so that we can be up there for 2, 3, maybe 4 days while we wait for rescue.
You can go to the top and you know you'll be safe. It feels really nice to have a special building because you feel protected.
This community decided that a tsunami evacuation center was important because they didn't have anywhere to go, and they decided to use their money to build the building. The additional cost is anywhere between 10 and 20% of the actual building cost itself, and that's really a sound investment for a lot of protection. You may be there a while, but you're safe and you're secure, and that's the most important thing.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And back with your marine weather update now. Marginal ice will continue across the Beaufort Seacoast. You see that broad area of blue. This is working its way westward and melting more of that ice closer to the coastline. We already have a lot of ice, open water, I'd say, across the Chukchi coast. Not quite sea ice free yet, of course, but you'll notice that very open water area creeping its way eastward. These two areas will likely meet here in the next week or so. The other thing to consider, though, is that a lot of what you see up north is pack ice, multi-year ice, very thick, very hard to melt quickly kind of stuff, and this is going to rotate around in the gyre. So as this opens up a little bit, we might see some of that thicker ice move southward toward the coast. Now, as we get into the forecast for southeast, look for light winds. The strongest winds up around the Lynn Canal from the south and east, 15 knots, 3-foot seas there. North and northwesterlies coming down through the inside passage, holding around 10 knots and 2-foot seas. And with high pressure in charge in this region, we're looking at very light winds coming ashore, if that. Most of those will be holding around 10 to 15 knots and looking at about 4 to 5-foot seas in the region. As we get into Thursday, not a whole lot of change there with the exception of the Lynn Canal. Look for a stronger southerly wind gusting to 35 knots and 4-foot seas are expected through your day there on Thursday. In Prince William Sound, expect an easterly flow on Wednesday, 10 knots and 2-foot seas, a stronger 25 to 30 knot wind moving out across the west and northwestern Gulf into the Barrens. It picks up even more to 35 knots with a 10 knot and 11-foot sea, and through the Cook Inlet, 15 knots, anywhere from about 2 to 3-foot seas there on Wednesday. Winds pick up on Thursday, northeasterlies 25 to 35 knots into the Barrens. You're looking at about 5 to 9-foot seas in Cook Inlet, 9 to maybe 10-foot seas across parts of the north and western Gulf, and 15 knots and 3-foot seas inside of Prince William Sound with that easterly wind. Across the Alaska Peninsula, easterlies will continue throughout the region, again wrapping into low pressure a little bit further to the south. 25 to 30 knots across the region there for Kodiak Island, and that'll bring us 9 to 11-foot seas in the area. Shelikof Strait, 35 knots, 9-foot seas, 25 knots on the Bering Sea coast side of the Alaska Peninsula with a 7-foot sea. The winds should let up just a little bit as we get into Thursday. Low pressure is working its way over Kodiak Island, so some of our strongest winds will be in the east over the Barren Islands and again Shelikof Strait and on either side of Kodiak Island. Look for winds to diminish through Bristol Bay and down the Bering Sea coast and also across the Pacific coastline, 15 to 20 knots in those areas with 4 to 7-foot seas, the highest of which will be on the Pacific side. As we look at the Aleutians, a high pressure sitting out across the west, that's keeping generally small seas and mostly light winds through the areas. Now, gap winds may be a little bit stronger at times. You'll notice 8 to 9-foot seas in the Bering Sea coast side and probably about the same on the Pacific side with smaller seas out to the west. Generally a north flow here with about 20 to 25 knots on Wednesday, and you can see seas building in just a little bit more up to about 10 feet north of Adak, Atka, and Nikolsky with a 15 to about 25 knot wind, mostly from the north and northeast as we go through your Thursday. For the west coast, light winds inside of Norton Sound, 15 knots and 3-foot seas there. A little bit of a stronger north wind here as you get down toward St. Matthew, St. Paul, and St. George. Seas rising to about 5 to 7 feet, and easterlies will be a little bit stronger here across the Kuskokwim Delta, 30 knots, and 8-foot seas expected in the region. As we get into Thursday, generally north and northeast winds continue 15 to 25 in all areas. There's 7 to 8-foot seas from St. Matthew down toward the Pribilofs, and northerlies continue in Norton Sound, 15 knots, and 3-foot seas expected there. For the North Slope, look for an easterly flow. This will be pretty constant through Thursday, 20 to 25 knots, 5-foot seas in some of the marginal ice areas and sea ice-free regions, and 10 to 15 knot winds across parts of the Chukchi Sea. Northerlies coming through the Bering Strait, 20 knots and 4-foot seas. As we get into easterly flow for the Beaufort Seacoast again Thursday, we're looking at 20 to 25 knots. No big change there north of Kaktovik, and north and easterly winds coming down through the Chukchi. 15 to 20 knots are expected on your Thursday. Recapping tonight's weather. We're still watching flooding around AKwx, and for the Koyukuk River, the flood warning is in effect and will likely remain so at least through Friday morning. While water levels may have come down where you are, there is still a possibility they'll come back up by another foot or so, kind of fluctuating as we go. There's still plenty of snow to melt, and with recent hot temperatures, the fluctuation in those river levels should be expected. We're also looking at higher water moving down toward Hughes and eventually down toward Hughesley. So make sure you're watching and being prepared for water coming your way down river on the Koyukuk. Showers are going to be likely across Prince William Sound and across the northern Gulf Coast, and also around the interior, especially in the vicinity of Fairbanks. Tonight, I do expect shower and thunderstorm activity on the North Slope to diminish quickly, but rain and snow showers may be more likely closer to the coast as cold air is certainly still sitting pretty right there in the same spot around the North Point. 988 millibar low south of the chain will sit in place as we go into Wednesday and Thursday, creating a better chance for shower and thunderstorm activity across the interior and the west coast as we go into Thursday. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.